that awesome? I mean, the lyrics are telling you it's awesome. So, if you don't know what that song is, that is from the Lego movie, which I'll be honest with you, as I'm not necessarily doing a commercial for it, but it was one of my favorite movies. When it came out, I think my wife and I were like the only adults that were in the theater without kids. And I was in tears the entire time. It was so funny and awesome. I mean, and the song is so catchy and just whatever. So I must make a confession here that there are times where everything is it's all together in my head. Everything is in place, ready to go, and sometimes it's not. And I will let you decide which one of those days today is. So as we begin, one of the things that Seth had been really focusing on is this ideal messenger. Isaiah was given this message, and I love this passage. We've been focusing on it for like the last 2 months in preparation, in presentation, things like that. And I've spent a lot of time reading over these verses. And I like what the gospel message, I mean, I know it's not gospel at that point, but the good news, I mean, that's what gospel means, that the good news given to Isaiah will bring him a way of understanding what a spiritual person is, because they're anointed. The Spirit of God is upon me to speak the truth, to provide healing, comfort, and release. And also, the message itself, which I think some of these things have been absolutely, absolutely important to focus on, is this hope for a hopeless time. We think we have a hopeless time today. Imagine having been in the time of Isaiah during the prophets when they've been exiled, when they've been shuffled around. So hope is far from their minds. And so when you look at this message, that it brings hope, that it brings freedom. We live in a land of freedom. So we don't really understand this quite as well. And actually, believe it or not, I don't think that they understood it all that well either. It brings release for the prisoner. It brings comfort to those who mourn. So the message itself is incredibly powerful. And the message brings about some effects. The first one, and we read this in last week's verse, I'm going to reread it in a little bit, is this concept of this oaks of righteousness. Now, if you've ever worked with wood, oak is not what we would call soft. It's not like pine. And there are one or two woodworkers in here who might correct me after this, but oak it's very hard. It's a dense, sturdy wood. And in fact, the word there for oaks in Hebrew refers to this mighty strength. And this message brings a sense of strength, this mighty strength for right living, for righteousness. Okay, so you have all this stuff that the message brings. You have an idea of what the messenger is. You start seeing these effects where they're oaks of righteousness. They're sturdy, they're strong. So what for? To display God's glory. This isn't for our personal gain. That is the best part about this message, is it's designed for us to speak into others. And that shows God's glory. And what it also does, and we're going to look at this today, hence the whole Lego thing, is it makes us builders, plain and simple. And we'll see what that means in this next passage. So, like last week and the week before, you will read the green when it comes up, and I will read the white. So here is Isaiah chapter 61, verses 1 through 4. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives, and release from darkness for the prisoner, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. Think about that for a second. Destroyed, ruined cities that have been gone for generations. But they're told they will rebuild this. Now, I have a video, and this to me was rather fun. And all this stuff up here is to kind of represent, if you don't know what these are, shame on you. These were my favorite toy, probably still today. I love these things. They are Legos. These are official Legos, and you'll see these are unopened. Now, the way it used to be is the instruction manual would, it would give you a layout of what you're doing, and you would just have bags that were unnumbered. So you'd open it up, you'd dump everything out, and then you'd have to sort through it. Well, I guess people like to be lazy because now the bags are numbered and the instructions make it even easier, and that's kind of frustrating, but the ultimate goal is to turn something like this, pieces that have, when you look at it, you have no idea what it is, and then turn it in to something readily identifiable. The reason I picked this is because, well, we'll see in a minute. But there is a video, it's about a minute long, and this is me assembling this thing because I wanted to do that for a sermon, but I figured you all would be bored out of your minds. So I figured, okay, we'll speed it up. So go ahead and show this video clip. And I wish I moved this fast in real life because I could get a lot of things done really quickly. Instead, it took me about 20 minutes to do it from memory, which is kind of sad. It should have been done quicker, but the concept is taking all of these pieces that when you look at it from the top, doesn't look like anything. And then building the foundation, building the platform upon which something that seems like nothing becomes something that you can see, that you can identify. Not gonna lie, I enjoy these things a lot because I got to spend some time last week playing with Legos as part of my sermon preparation. That's fun until my kid gets a hold of it. And then it's a different story. So that right there is this in its completed form. And the reason why I did that is because if we go to this next slide, I'm going to do a little bit of math for you. This is going to be a very simple equation. You'll enjoy it. It'll be fun. And it'll start with Alan. There's a picture of me plus Legos equals geek. All right? And that's equation number one. Equation two, Alan plus Legos plus train equals super geek. so this was everything all in one. But no, when I saw that from ashes to builders, I've always enjoyed working with my hands. It's a natural aptitude I have. I've been playing with Legos since I'm probably 3 or 4. There was a span where I had to pretend I was an adult, but then we had Levi's, so I get to be a kid again in some part. But to me, it was very tactile. I could see it. I could do it. I understand a completed project. But now when we think about what that means in terms of our spiritual lives, being a builder comes with a bunch of effects. I mean, if anybody's ever tried to build a house or build a shed or build anything, it's not like you just grab stuff and randomly throw it together. There's a plan, there's a purpose, and believe it or not, in these effects, when we look at what Isaiah is telling them, he's telling his his audience that they will be builders. And Seth and I got in a little bit of a discussion as to if it's causative or not, where the gospel message comes to them, the good news comes to his recipients, and it causes them to be these oaks of righteousness, to be builders. And let's see what these effects look like. You know, it's ends up being, and this probably is the key point in all of this, it's a reversal of the past. Who here does not have something in your life that you would love to go back and correct? Hands up. If your hands aren't up, I think you're lying. Because there, in all of our lives, there's a moment that we wish we could go back and say, well, I wish I wouldn't have said that. Or I wish I wouldn't have done that. So to think about being able to reverse the past. And why do I mean that? Because it's built upon the foundations of the past. When Isaiah is talking about that, he says, they will rebuild the ruins. So there had to be something upon which to build, and that was the foundation of the past. The old covenant that God had with his people was a great foundation, but that didn't matter to them. They didn't care. At least by this point, they didn't. So this concept of being able to reverse the past not only gives them a chance to build upon the foundation of the past, but brings them the chance to restore the original beauty and majesty of that relationship. I'm kind of fussy with how I like things at times. I like old houses. I mean, I like the concept of it. I like the appearance of it, but I like modern amenities. I would not want to buy a 200 or 250-year-old house which doesn't have plumbing or windows or doors or, well, a bathroom. So, but I love to see some of these old buildings restored. Now, I grew up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which is the Moravian capital of the North, because the Southerners didn't like them, so they booted them, and they settled up there. And there are a lot of buildings up there in downtown Bethlehem that are 200-plus years old. And when you look at them, the fact that they're still standing means that there was a good foundation, somebody knew what they were doing, and there hasn't been a whole lot of restoration projects, at least that I know of. And these things have stood there. They were there, actually, the Sun Inn, and this has, if you don't care, that's whatever, I don't care. But the Sun Inn, which was part of all of this, George Washington stayed there on his way through to when he crossed the Delaware. And so we have some reminder of what the original beauty and majesty was. But there are also places that have fallen into significant disrepair, and they don't look beautiful and they don't look majestic. They just look like a pile of rocks that need to be taken out. But in order to kind of understand this and to get what this reversal of the past is, they will also be able to succeed where they've failed in the past. That's a hard lesson for anyone to learn. Failing is not fun. Losing is no fun. And what it should do is these failings and these losings should inspire us to be better. So you'd figure the pattern is these things are ruined. They have the chance to build. They have a chance to reverse this. They have a chance to restore this majesty and beauty and succeed where their forefathers have failed. Sounds good, doesn't it? Sounds like a great plan. It also brings a renewal and a rebirth. It says, you will restore these former devastations. It was interesting as I was doing some of the Hebrew work, this term, this former devastation, it's referring to a place that's uninhabitable. Most of us, we might think of a ghost town, where tumbleweed is rolling through, like an old Western. That to us is maybe the best concept that we have of uninhabitable. But this is talking about bringing back people that weren't even there, restoring something. I mean, it almost is to borrow the Latin ex nihilo, out of nothing, to bring back habitation to a place that's uninhabitable. That is a renewal and a rebirth. And when you think of this in covenant, in the terms of the covenant that Jesus fulfills in us, all these words ring so true. And it brings new life out of death. This is the power that this good news has. The good news that Isaiah had, the same good news that Jesus had, also brings hope for future success. I don't know about you, but I like to think that I'm setting things up to succeed in the future. Whatever that means. I would rather not be in debt. I'd rather not have to constantly work on a house, which if you own a house, there's no possible way that you could not constantly work on it. It's just reality. But I like to think that what I'm doing is providing for success in the future for my family. I don't think I would set out to say, well, how can I destroy all of this? It just doesn't make any sense, but it's funny. Sometimes in life, that's what we do. When Seth was praying for addicts, an addict really has no hope for future success. It's a constant present fixation. In our society, it lends itself to foster that. Immediate gratification is what we're after. We don't get this idea of trying to set up for a future. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Advertising, all the things that we see around us constantly try to get us in the here and now. That's how our economy works. It's all debt-based. What are you willing to pay for later that you can get now? And there is unfortunately some necessity to that, but when that's your mode of operation, it really doesn't bring a whole lot of hope for future success. The success is maybe eventually paying things off. So we see this reversal of the past, being able to rebuild these ancient ruins. This renewal and rebirth in the fact that they're able to rebuild and restore these former devastations. And then we see this reconnection with God. Now, one of the things that I enjoy about the Old Testament is it's almost like the rule of three. Things happen in three, or, three is a magic number. For memory acquisition, if you repeat something 3 times, you're more apt to remember that and file it away in your longer-term memory or whatever. So those, those psychologists or whatever they call themselves, tend to be. And yeah, I'm poking fun at one person here, but there's something about that repetition. Well, in Hebrew, when you see something repeated, that to them is something that you need to get, and you need to understand it, and they do it to add intensity. If you've ever been yelled at by your parents, which I'm guessing I might be the only one, if they repeat something, usually that means you're in trouble, or you get in further trouble. Unless, of course, you're my father, and I'm going to poke fun at him a little bit. This is terrible, and here comes another confession where when he would get frustrated, he would just repeat himself. Like, if I couldn't find something, he would get organized. So I would do these, I would do these things so I would forget where I put. Like, it was always Little League Baseball. I hated it. I hated it because I am not at all athletic. And to me, it was, I would rather pull my own teeth out than, I just couldn't do it. I hated it. It was not enjoyable because when you don't have the aptitude, it's, this isn't enjoyable at all. This is no fun. So I would just kind of chuck my mitt into the closet somewhere, and I could never find it. And I would do that on purpose, just so it would frustrate my dad. So I would hear him say, get organized, get organized. But in his repetition, I do remember him saying that. But in Hebrew, in this passage, when it was talking about restoring these former devastations, uses that word twice to emphasize the importance of what they're going to do. To rebuild and restore these ruined cities, these former devastations that have been around for a long time. I think God is giving us this timeline, saying, look, it's not just what you're seeing here. This goes way far back. Personally, I think he's talking about going back to Adam. That this good news is going to bring this reconnection with God that will restore thousands of years of sinful separation. The 10 Commandments, the 600 some odd Levitical law, all of this stuff, it was designed to help guide us so that we could have this connection with God. But the problem is, when that's your focus, you're not trying to connect with God. You're just trying to make sure that you don't get in trouble. It's trying to find as far to the line as you can get without crossing it. That's the problem with this. The intention is that I want to break the law, but I don't want to get in trouble. It has nothing to do with God doesn't want me to do this. So that's the problem. By this point, God's hands are up. He's like, look, I've given you multiple ways to fix this, and you just don't care. But the good news is that God cares so much that he will empower us, and he will be the one to help us restore these years that have been separated, and also to aid in repairing the ruins that we have done to ourselves. That's the interesting concept that we see in this term, devastation is used the second time. One of the contexts that's used in is to ruin oneself. It puts the onus on us. That some of this separation is because of who we are, the sinful selfishness that is constantly, nagging at us. This good news will aid in repairing that. And will also prepare us to receive this new covenant. Now, Isaiah writes this bare minimum 450 years before Jesus comes around. I'm thinking probably somewhere around 800 years, give or take. It depends on who you read and the dating of this stuff, but think about that message that I don't even know if Isaiah himself knew what this new covenant would be. We have the pleasure of being on this side of Jesus' work, this side of history, because we have this new covenant. We have a God who says, look, because you were unwilling to do this, I will take it upon myself. I will be the one to turn this from this. I will be the one to restore this relationship, to reconnect with you, to give you renewal and rebirth. And not only does God give us the opportunity to reverse the past, but he takes the opportunity to remove that past. It's interesting. Isaiah can be a tough book to read because there is some browbeating in there. There is some hope. There is some desolation, I guess. I'm trying to think of a good word there. But we also get this picture of the suffering servant. Isaiah 54 talks about that. Talks about, how God will rise up. There will be this righteous remnant. There will be one upon whom all of this stuff rests. He's talking about Jesus long before Jesus even comes around. And so that good news that Isaiah spoke It's the same good news that Jesus fulfills and he brings to you. And we have the gift of the Holy Spirit that makes all this stuff happen. We have the gift of being empowered by God's grace and God's love to do what God has called us to do, to be these builders, to help restore the things we have broken.